The Coyote. This is the Outside Gate with Steve Hall on the L4 Media Network, where we talk US moto and anywhere the conversation goes. Joining me today is former motocrosser turned enduro, turned desert rider, turned test rider, and more. Charles Halcomb. How are you?
Steve, doing fine, but just glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
No worries, Charles. Yeah. Hey, we started talking about some stuff just before I hit record, man, and it was some great stuff you were telling me about. So let's rather than me asking any questions, I'm just going to let you get back into what you were just talking about. That was really good stuff.
Well, I was real fortunate, Steve. We had a bunch of tracks that were fairly close to where I lived, and a bunch of friends that were all riding around local areas here, and we can't. Those areas are all closed down now or whatever, but we were real fortunate to be able to grow up in a time to where we had access to all those things, easy access, if you will. And friends of mine were racing around local tracks, and they were bringing home trophies and riding around all local areas. I was a little bit faster than them, but finally talked my parents into letting me ride a race, and had a paper route and saved up some money and bought a Honda SL 100, and that was my first race bike. But anyway, from there, just kept going to races and ended up working for a local shop here called Moore & Sons Motorcycles. They were one of the first Husqvarna dealers in the United States. 1966, I believe, was the first year they started bringing in bikes. And the motorcycle dealer, a guy by the name of John Moore, belonged to a local club here called the Ridge Runners. And Edison Dye, who was the U.S. importer for Husqvarnas, was obviously trying to promote Husqvarna, his product, if you will, and the sport of motocross, which was relatively unknown in the U.S. about that time. So he brought in Joel Robert, Roger DeCoster, all these European guys that had been racing in Europe for a while. They raced the first time on the East Coast, a place called Pepperell. And then Edison Dye knew that John Moore had access to a motorcycle club here in the West Coast, Santa Cruz, which is where I live. And he talked John and his club into putting on a race here, basically one of the first Interams. And Bob Grossi, they all used to practice up there, a place called De La Vieja, which is once again turned into a golf course. And we did a 50-year reunion here a couple of years ago to benefit Road to Recovery, and which is a corporation or whatever, a funding source for riders that get hurt. And we actually raised close to $65,000. And we talked about doing it every 5 years. We had Brock Glover, Tom Webb from the magazines. We had David Bailey up here, and we had several different fundraising functions. We had a mountain bike race or a mountain bike ride through the town of Santa Cruz that Billy Grossi, former factory Suzuki rider, led. And then we had a golf tournament that Brock and David Bailey and I and Tom Webb all took. I think we had 50, 60 guys, something like that. Jeff Fox from Fox Racing was one of the main fundraisers, and Jeff actually took part in the golf tournament. But we talked about doing it every 5 years, and Tom Rapp was another guy that came down from Montana that was here, and we did that in 2019, and we said every 5 years, and well, all of a sudden it's time to get the preparations going again for another one of these things.
Sounds fantastic. Yeah, I see that you were recently at a Fox 50th anniversary. That looked like a pretty cool event. Like I'd love to be a fly on the wall there. That's for sure. There would have been some good stories getting told.
Nah, Steve, it was pretty neat. It was like I said, I was real fortunate to be in the same area, whatever, with Fox. When Fox, there's two brothers, Jeff and Bob Fox. Jeff was a kind of got into the clothing end of it, and Bob Fox got into the suspension part of it, and both unbelievably successful. They both started in the garage, and was Fox Racing. Jeff Fox sold his corporation here a little while ago, and his two sons, Pete and Greg, are still involved, and they were at the anniversary dinner here the other night. They basically put on a dinner for the I think 70, 80 people for all the employees, and they voted, or they brought in 5 of us riders. A guy by the name of Pat Richter lives up in Alaska. Pat came down and stayed with us for a night, and Dana Waxham, another one of the Fox riders, a NorCal guy. John Nelson, and then Billy Grossi rode over with Pat and I. So we had 5 riders there or whatever, but it was just a neat deal. They had a great get together, kind of cocktails and stuff for an hour or so, and slideshow for another hour or so, and then people got up and spoke about their feelings and their position with Fox. But no, it was a neat event. They Pete and Greg Fox put the thing together, and they did an admirable job. We had the dress code was basically from the 70s and 80s, and fortunately Grossi and I and a few other guys still had our jerseys from back in the day. So actually Jeff Fox actually had one of his on too. So it was a neat event though, but it was just an honor to be a part of the thing.
Yeah, very, very cool. Very cool. Yeah. The Sugar Bear was there. That's
oh yeah.
I'm a big fan of moto nicknames, and that's one of the best. That's definitely one of the
for
best.
sure. His he had a couple of nicknames or whatever. Artemis Gordon was another one or whatever, because of he had this big head of hair, and Artemis Gordon was one of the guys on the Wild Wild West, which was a TV show back in the day, and his mechanic Jojo named that. They actually put Artemis on the back of his leathers for a couple of the deals. And then the Sugar Bear thing, he doesn't really like to talk about. He was good looking kid and good looking guy or whatever. Wherever there was a race, there was a girl there, and there was a cereal back in the day called Sugar Bear that you just can't get enough. And so that was another nickname that kind of came to be.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I have heard that he doesn't really like it, but yeah, but it's cool. That's for sure. It's very, very cool. Yeah.
And Steve, like I said, he lives, a couple of minutes from me here or whatever. Like I say, growing up, he was obviously one of my idols or whatever. He factory rider for Suzuki and Husqvarna, and then I think later on in his career with the Carabella. But anyway, he was. He basically hurt his knee or whatever, and that was his career or whatever. But he was in contention came down to Louisiana for the last 500cc national race. Really was tied, I believe, with Gary Semix, and last lap or whatever, got caught up in some fencing in his rear wheel, and had to stop and take it out, and lost the championship because of that. But he was one of the best riders in the country for sure at that time.
Yeah. So there's a lot known and a lot, said, I guess, through my experience with magazines about the Southern Californian scene. I really know that well, but obviously the NorCal scene was super strong as well. All you and all your mates and that sort of thing. What were the most popular tracks up around Santa Cruz back in the day?
I'm sorry, Steve, the what?
What were the most popular tracks up,
Oh, primary, yeah. We had Plymouth, which was kind of it was one of the first nationals on the West Coast called Hangtown. And they had it in a town called Plymouth for quite a few years, and then it moved to where it's at now. And but yeah, Plymouth was one of the good ones. We used to have these north versus south races, a place called Santa Maria, which was about halfway through northern and right in the middle of California, and it was a real sandy track. And I just remember one of the mechanics here, that was a guy by the name of John Preston, that was Billy Grossi's brother's mechanic, and they'd go down there, and they always thought that Bobby had some kind of a enhanced power or whatever with his Husqvarna. But you watch the videos, those guys, even the local guys, they had these big berms. It was a sandy track, and these guys are going into the berms and trying to pivot or whatever, and there'd be a straightaway right after it, whereas Bobby would go around the top of the thing and be like a gear taller, and he'd pass these guys, if he didn't get the good start or whatever, he'd pass these guys going down the straightaway, and they were all protesting the bikes all the time or whatever every time he went down there, because he just whooped those guys. But it was fun just watching Bobby in those videos or whatever. I learned quite a bit from him. We used to go down there, and I don't think I lost too many races down there. I'd try to do the same thing, that emulate Bobby by going high and keeping the straightaways up. I had Steve, one of the first bikes after the Honda SL100. I had a Montesa 125, which was kind of probably even slower than the Husky 125s at the time. But this John Moore, who I was working for, I worked for on Saturdays when I was 14 years old. He'd save tires all week long. And they'd come in, and there'd be tires to the ceiling. Thinks, Halcomb, you pop a tube, you're going to be paying for it. So all day Saturday, I'd be changing tires or whatever. But that actually came into play to my advantage. See, back when I started riding ISDE 6 days events, every day before you impound your bikes, what they call the parc permet, you get a 15-minute work period. Well, I knew how to change tires pretty quick or whatever, so I'd change 2 tires in that work period, and then the next morning, air filter or change oil or whatever, where the other riders were usually changing 1 tire at night, and then you get another 15-minute work period in the morning. They change another one in the morning, where I'd already have that done. But anyway, John's just retired, sold his Husqvarna dealership, and his son is in the same area now, John Moore Jr., selling e-bikes, electric mountain bikes. And we just had breakfast the other day when we had the Fox anniversary party that evening. We had a little breakfast with Billy Grossi and Pat Richter and a couple other buddies of mine. And then John Moore showed up. He's 80 years old, just had a new hip and doing fine. So it was just good to see John. He was good part of my life.
I love it. I love any time, obviously I'm a historian and a big fan of the sport, and I follow all the legends, and I love how much you guys still get together. That it's fantastic. I reckon, yeah, just love it. Anytime I see it,
we were talking a little bit ago about even the what they call the Northern California Motocross reunion that we did, that we had the benefit for Road to Recovery. A couple of guys, it's a big effort to get everybody together or whatever, but we're going to do another one here probably next year, instead of every 5 years, because we're just starting to lose. I'm 66 years old and starting to lose guys. And but Eric Crippa, like I said, we talked about him earlier. He was Kent Howard's mechanic. He just passed away. So next week they're doing a memorial, and Eric was a big part of my life. Like I said, I met him. Steve, I grew up, like I said, racing here in Northern California or whatever. And I started riding a few nationals or whatever, but then in 1978, Husqvarna approached me and 4 other guys. They took 1 guy from each segment of the country: Northwest, Northeast, the Southeast and Southwest, and the middle. The Northwest was Chuck's son. I was the Southwest. Arlo Englund was the Colorado central guy, and then a guy by the name of Jim Both was from New England, and Dan Farley was from Florida. So we had all segments of the United States covered, and we were all hired to ride the Trans Am in the support class. There's 5 of us. They called us the Delirious Dozen because there was 5 of us or whatever, but they rented a warehouse right next to the parts facility that Husqvarna had for the U.S. in Nashville, Tennessee, kind of centrally located, for you will, with all the Trans Ams. And 5 of us worked out of there, and we had a mechanic by the name of Tom Volan that kept track of us. And then Eric Crippa was Kent Howard's mechanic, and Eric would jump in too or whatever to help out if need be. We had a practice facility right behind the warehouse there in Nashville, and it was just we didn't see 8 months. We didn't see home for 8 months, riding all the different races and what have you. And my wife at the time, actually it was my girlfriend at the time, was with me. And like I said, we didn't see Santa Cruz. We had a little travel trailer that we pulled behind us. And funny story, but I'm sorry if I'm jumping around from here to there, but at Unadilla, when you're in New England, it's cold, and they had time trials on Saturday. And like I said, we had that travel trailer, and it's raining, a little overcast. And guy walks by. My wife had just came out with a hot cup of tea for me, and this guy walks by and says, "Oh boy, that looks good." And my wife, being how she is, I just didn't know who the guy was or whatever. But says, "Hey, I've got, I just got more. I've got some right here." He goes, "Oh, that you don't mind? That sounds good." Well, it was Roger DeCoster. So Roger came into our trailer and sat there for a while and talked to him, and then that night we all used to go to a place called Norwich for Italian food, for pasta, for, everybody used to like to eat little carbohydrates before the race. And Roger walks by, and our table there, I'm with Chuck Sun and Arlo England and Eric Krippa and Kent Howerton, and here comes God, 5-time world champion Roger DeCoster, by our table, and he looks at Chuck and I, and there was a section of the track, Steve, called Screw You. It was straight down and made a turn at the bottom and straight back up. And Chuck and I were one of the only 250s getting up the thing. And so Roger walks by and looks at us, says, "Hey, if they run that section tomorrow," because they were talking about taking it out because it was raining, "they run that section, you or Chuck are going to win this thing," and then keeps going. Well, these guys, we look at each other like, Jesus, that was God, and didn't even know that he knew us or whatever. But there was some, I'm leading into a different story here, but when I ran the Valley Motorsports team, was a motocross team and what they call Works Racing World Off-Road Championship. It was like a long, tall hare scramble or whatever. Our owner wanted to start racing motocross about halfway through the series. But when I was running the Valley Motorsports team, Davey Coombs used to get all of us team managers together every week. "Hey, do you guys," because there was a designated parking every week. We got to we knew where we were all parking, and so David would get us all together to make sure that there was any complaints or improvements. And so he introduced all of us, and nobody needed to introduce Roger. And Roger looks over at David, goes, "Oh, Charles and I have known each other for a long time. We had tea one time." Well, Steve, it was 30 some years. And so I'm looking at, had kind of obviously a perplexed look on my face, and Roger goes, "You don't remember?" Well, there was 50, 60 people in this room. I go, "No, Roger, I don't." He said, "You don't remember me coming out with the tea, your wife coming out with the tea, and I sat in the tray." I go, "Oh yeah, cram it, I do now, Roger. It's a hell of a memory." And then Davey Coombs picks up. He goes, "Charles, he didn't remember you. He remembered your wife." So just kind of a funny story. But every time I see Roger now, he'll bring up the tea thing.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love it. Yeah. That's really cool, man. Really cool. So your first bike was the SL100. So that's back in the day where you had to get a little trail bike and strip the lights off and
right,
all that sort of stuff. What else how did you prep the SL100? They had steel fenders, didn't they? So was it like fenders off or plastic? Were Preston Petty fenders around by then, or
yeah, I think I know the front fender, Steve, was a metal one, and I actually had crashed and kind of bent that, so I just put a Preston Petty, which was a plastic fender. On the bike was a green bike or green fender or whatever, so that it actually worked out all right. But yeah, I took the lights off it, and then there was a guy, actually that same race, there was a 100cc class, and there was a guy by the name of Keith Bontrager that was in the same race. Well, Bontrager went on to he's done real well for himself. He developed all these disc brakes for mountain bikes and all kinds of other products for mountain bikes. And even in our same area here, Rock Shocks was developed here by a guy by the name of Paul Turner. Paul went on to become a mechanic for factory Honda, and then once he built the Rock Shocks or whatever, I mean, obviously quit Honda and all the motorcycle stuff or whatever, and developed all his time to. And Rock Shock turned into a multi-million-dollar deal. They were OEM on on all the different bicycles, and still are to this day. But Paul is over in Maui, and actually just had got remarried and just had a child here about a year ago. So he's our age or whatever. So he's starting all over again now. But from what I understand, we were talking about Eric Crippa earlier. Paul's in Maui now, but I guess Paul's coming over for the memorial for Eric Crippa, and Steve Simons with Simons Forks. Steve used to work with Eric also when Eric was working with Brad Lackey. And anyway, so it's going to be a good reunion. You'll see those guys all next week.
Yeah, Simons Forks, man. Yeah, that's some legendary stuff. That was the go-to, wasn't it? You had to have the Simons Forks, yeah, with the yellow tubes,
yeah,
and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, yeah.
And once again,
very cool.
And once again, Steve, I was right in the middle of where all that developed. I mean, I had the Fox Air Shocks on the back of my bike, and John Moore from the motorcycle dealership that I was working for here in Santa Cruz, he won a trip for selling a bunch of Husqvarnas over to Sweden. And he brought back the factory at that time. We're running factory bikes. We're running this Bilstein shocks. And so we actually took the lower shock mount, moved it back on the swing arm, put the Bilsteins on, and I had those on there for a couple of races. And then that's when Fox came out with their air shocks, and they got me a pair of the air shocks. And then I had the Steve Simons Forks, and that was a good bike. That was in 1974, which was my first 250 CR, what they call the 250 mag.
That would have been the absolute elite setup at the time with the Fox shocks and the Simons Forks. Yeah. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's funny, like with my age, like I got into I got into moto in the 80s, but straight away I had a fascination with the history before that, and my knowledge of the 70s is pretty good, and I love those 70s bikes, even though they sort of predate me. But yeah, I reckon all that sort of stuff's cool. Love anything vintage and all that sort of stuff. And I love that period of development of the bikes, where if you look at the difference between a like a 73 model and an 83 model, it's just incredible, isn't it? There's never been a jump like that, and there can't really be, because they got so good so quick. Like, and just every year there was it's just wild, isn't it? Like, especially if you look at a like a 74 Elsinore, and then look at an 84 CR250. You're like, wow,
Right? No,
it's not even the same sport, is it?
No, you're right, Steve. It looks like a totally different sport for sure. But
yeah,
like I say, I got into racing motorcycle, I rode the nationals and what have you. And Stephen, I signed a contract for Husqvarna in 1979 to race all the sport classes. So one of the first races was at Plymouth. I'm sorry, Hangtown. They moved at Plymouth to a place where they hold the races now called Rancho Cordova. It's an off-road vehicle park in Sacramento, Rancho Cordova. And there was a Fox rider by the name of Larry Wasik, real good friend of mine. He was in front of me in the first moto, and I was catching him, and I really wanted to beat him. We're cowboys or whatever, and I'd caught up to him with about 2 laps to go, and they didn't have big fences and everything like they did now, and a spectator jumped across the track. Guy was drunk. Larry hit him. Larry didn't go down, and then I hit into Larry and the spectator, and I went over the bars and broke the throttle off. And when I reached up to stop the bike, it pulled my arm into the rear wheel and ground down a bunch of my elbow, and so that was the end of my motocross career, if you will. And I moved up to Minden, Gardnerville, Nevada, to help my dad with a townhouse project that he was building. And the guy we bought the townhouse project from had a motorcycle dealership. It was kind of interesting. My dad came back after negotiating for the property and says, Charles, they know who you are, and they don't even know who I am. Here I am spending, a fair amount of money to buy this property. I go, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, I came into one of the group that was selling the property is a company called Valley Investments, and a guy by the name of Jesse Goldberg owned a motorcycle dealership. And when I said Phil Halcomb was my name to buy the property, he says, "Oh, are you Charles Halcomb's father?" So it was funny, but I ended up racing off-road up there once my arm healed, and got to be in with a guy by the name of Rich Thorwaldson. Rich was a factory Suzuki rider back in the day and built these products called swing arms, these aluminum swing arms called Thor Racing. And his son, Richie Thorwaldson, has a very successful shop up in Reno now called Moto Source. But anyway, Rich talked me into riding the ISDE because, Charles, man, with your motocross background, you should ride some of these. So I went to some of the events. I qualified my first year. So the first year, Steve was in Holland. And so on gold medal, actually, I won District 36 that year, which was a cross-country. District 36 consists of Northern California and Oregon and parts of Nevada. And I won the district that year. So KTM gave me a bike for the ISDE 250. And last day, Steve, I'm heading into the final motocross, and one of our riders, our trophy team guy by the name of Kevin Brown, was broken down. So another rider can help another rider. So usually it's a short transport section, 15, 20 miles of the final motocross. So there was some barbed wire there, and wrapped some barbed wire on Kevin's bike and towed him in. He did an hour out. I almost did too with Kevin, and for doing that or whatever. I gave away a gold medal. I got the AMA Sportsman of the Year for doing that. On the way home, then, I'm leading up to how I got really involved in the motorcycle industry. Dick Burleson was the off-road manager for Husqvarna, 8-time national enduro champion. And on the way home on the plane, he's like, "Charles, hey, you know what? You're fairly decent with people, and we're looking for a press relations manager in San Diego." So my wife and we'd finished the townhouse project, and we just built a house in Gardnerville, and went down and talked to Mark Blackwell, who was running Husqvarna at the time, and they made me an offer, and I accepted it. So we put our house up for sale, sold it, and moved down to San Diego. And then I ran the press relations for 2 years, and then Mark Blackwell, who was my boss at the time, had me take over the motocross management duties with Danny Laporte and Mickey Diamond. And I did that for about 6 months, and then Husqvarna got bought out by Cagiva Ducati, and it wasn't a real good transition for the dealers and what have you. So Mark left and went to Suzuki. And at that time, Suzuki had a PE, which was an off-road enduro bike that they hadn't had for quite a few years, but they wanted to get in the off-road market. Well, when I was with Husqvarna, my goal was to promote Husqvarna through the magazines. And when we had our new model introduction every year, everybody was interested to see what we were having. But I started building bikes, this kind of off-road transmission, WR transmission, put it into a CR frame, and they bring it to the magazines, just to keep the name out there. So we went from, I think, 22 pages of press in 1983 to like 117 the year I was there. And so I got kind of known for building these niche bikes. And when Mark went to Suzuki, he'd found that they wanted to get back into the off-road market. And so talked me into going over there for an interview, and it was more money. They hired me. Actually, Steve is a staff engineer, so I could get the money that I wanted. And a little while later, they took me in confidence to where they had a bike that they were going to call the RMX. And so I put together what I thought was going to be all the good features to have in an RMX: a 3.2 gallon gas tank, quick change wheels, and what have you. They're not going to build a bike based on some guy's opinion. So they did these focus groups. They sent out these questionnaires to all the dealers, and the requirements for the bike came back almost exactly to what I thought we should have. And so several trips to Japan that year, that was the fastest concept of production bike that Suzuki had ever built. And they were going to hire Dick Burleson. Mark Blackwell and Dick Burleson were good friends from Husqvarna. And Mark was going to hire Dick Burleson to ride the RMX in the National Enduro Series. But Dick was I think 35, 38 years old at the time, and really hadn't won a race in a couple of years. And I just rode the 6 days with a kid by the name of Randy Hawkins. And I could beat Randy in the motocross stuff, but in the tight, twisty stuff, like in the terrain stuff, got to be gone. So I'm like, Mark, what happens if we hire a guy like Dick Burleson to ride the RMX and he doesn't win? Is it the bike or is it Dick? What happens if we hire a kid that's never won a national enduro? He's won some Cetra events, which is the Southeast Trail Riders Association back in South Carolina. What happens if we hire a kid that nobody knows about, never heard of, and doesn't win on the RMX? Well, nobody's ever heard of him. But what happens if we hire a guy that nobody's heard of and he wins on the RMX? The bike's going to look pretty good. If Dick Burleson doesn't win on it, former national enduro champion, it's going to be the bike.
Yeah.
So Mark liked the strategy, so we ended up going with Randy Hawkins. Randy wanted to win 6 seasons in a row, 6 championships in a row. And I don't know how many. Steve Hatch we had hired at the same time. Steve won national enduro or air scrambles championships, and Rodney Smith went on to win, I think, 5 GNCC championships. So right after that, though, the 2-stroke was a hit. And Mark says, Charles, Mr. Shigenoya, our company president, wants to build a 4-stroke. So Al Baker was Johnny O'Mara's motocross team manager. And when Johnny joined Suzuki, Al Baker, like I said, was part of it. So Al had a real instrumental part of the XR Honda line success because Al was one of the main guys. He was real good friends with Mr. Mugen, who was affiliated with Honda also. And so we got Al and myself to build a BR350. And that came out to be pretty good. In fact, they still have it. It's in a water-cooled version now or whatever. But that wasn't everything that Dick and I wanted on the bike. We had to sacrifice some stuff with the cost or whatever. But Steve, lot of fun though. We had what they say, the National Enduro Championships with Randy and Steve, and those guys were just a treat to I still talk to them, once a month or whatever, just lifelong friends or whatever. But anyway, from there, Steve, Bob Hanna, I got to know pretty good. I used to go out, was involved with the RM production testing. So I got to know Bob Hanna and some of the guys. I used to go out with the guys and not ride with them or whatever, but see how the bikes are working. The motocross guys, Ronnie Titchener, George Holland, Eric Kehoe, those were all guys at the time. And Bob actually was having some issues with the motocross team manager, was an older guy. And Bob actually said that unless they replaced me as the motocross team manager, he was going to resign. So they made me, I went from the off-road racing supervisor or manager to the motocross team manager, actually race team manager. I was in charge of the GSXR contingency, the motocross team, the road racing, and the off-road or whatever. So I did that for 2 years, and we just had my son, Casey, and I was gone, 44 weekends the last year. This guys, I need help. No, you're doing a great job. No, I can't be gone this long. Hope anyway, I quit, Steve, and then went on to become a district sales manager. That got us back up to Santa Cruz where I lived. And it was the same thing. They were going to cut the district down, Steve, and I'm gone 3 or 4 nights a week. And anyway, speaking of Hannah, this is kind of funny, Steve. I had some Hannah didn't show up at an event one time. I don't know if you can see these. It's got
oh yeah.
Hannah's nickname was Buckwheat.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic.
But, he was supposed to ride for a answer ad, and something happened. He was flying. Bob used to fly down from Idaho. They had some trouble or whatever, so they put me in the pants or whatever. So I was the Bob Hanna for a RM production ad back in the day. But anyway, I turned in to be a district sales manager, Steve, and the same thing. just gone too long. And so I resigned. And my dad was a tile contractor, granite contractor here in town, and he had retired. So we jumped in doing that. And Honda called and says, hey, a guy by the name of Bruce Ogilvie. Bruce was the off-road racing manager in charge of production testing and all that. So Charles, you guys did a great job with the DR350. We're going to build a bike comparable. We'd like to use your expertise and what have you, but your name is so associated with Suzuki. We want you to ride some high visibility events. So my partner, one of the biggest off-road events at the time was the Baja 1000. So I had some experience riding the Baja races and stuff, or not Baja races, but off-road with the District 36 stuff here, the cross-country thing. And actually, even in 1986, when I'm jumping around a little bit here, but when Husqvarna went to Ducati Cagiva wanted me to ride a 125 Cagiva in the ISTE in Holland, in Italy. So I went over and I rode the thing, got a gold medal, landed at 6th overall in the 125 class. But right after that, they go, hey, God, you did such a great job. We want you to ride the Baja 1000 in November on a 125. And I'm like, guys, every 4 years it goes from Ensenada down to La Paz, it's 1,000 miles. We're got pits every 50 miles. I go, we're going to need engines every. He goes, no, this guy Moriali, who was a mechanic, says, no, Moriali has been doing dyno testing and he thinks he has a bike that'll make it. So a guy by the name of Dwayne Summers and I took a pre-production one out in Diablo Dry Lake, which was a big dry lake, Steve, 20 miles long, real silty and what have you. Tried to blow the bike up and never did. So we rode the race in it, and there was 72 motorcycles. I think there was only 7 or 8 125, but we finished first 125, 6th overall motorcycle that year. And bikes were really, really good. But anyway, that was, I'm, like I said, jumping around a little bit. But now when Honda called, they say, we want you to start riding some of the ISDE events, the qualifiers and stuff, and some of the Baja races. And my partner was a guy by the name of Chuck Miller. And so at the time there was Chuck Miller and I, and then Johnny Campbell and Jeff Kapp. And Johnny went on to win. I think he's won the Baja 1000 11 times. And Steve, just to get through the pre-running, I mean, it's pretty gnarly. I mean, it's high speed, and it's like you guys have that I'm trying to think, Toby.
Fink.
Yeah, that event, or whatever, is real similar probably to our Baja, or whatever. But it's high speed, and I mean, a lot of stuff happens. For Johnny to win 11 of those things in a row was just phenomenal. But 1994, we got second in 93, and 94 we were leading it. I started and finished the race. We were leading the race, and Steve, you pre-ride all that stuff. That's kind of how I help justify going down and riding these things or whatever. We pre-ride for a week and a half, 2 weeks. We have helicopters the day of the race with push button, communication. And the last thing I remember, Johnny and Jeff had broken ignition, and I started. You draw for starting position, Steve, every 30 seconds, and we do number 9. So I was 4 minutes behind the lead group. After 280 miles, we were only 20 seconds behind him. So we were second overall physically, but on elapsed time, we were leading the race by almost 4 minutes. And last thing I remember is Bruce Ogilvie gets on the on the phone or on the radio and says, "Hey, Johnny and Jeff broke an ignition. We got to land them, get them one. Great job. We'll see you at Perdicitas." So they're not going to be in front of me. So I double clicked to let them know that I heard, and went over this rise, Steve, like I had a dozen times pre-running. I knew it didn't go left or right, so I just left the throttle wide open, and saw some skid marks there. And I'm like, I know Larry Rosser, LR, was on the bike. I go, he must have forgot this thing was straight here. And that's what I was thinking. Well, his helicopter had seen the ditches that they dug the night before. So they radioed down to Larry, and Larry saw him and hit the brakes. And meanwhile, my helicopter was gone. And I went over this thing and hit the thing and went to sleep for about 8 weeks. I was in a coma for about 8 weeks. So that was really the end of my racing, off-road racing career.
Yeah, geez, that's such. Oh, yeah, I've heard stories about the yeah, digging ditches and
Yeah.
putting things on the track and digging jumps and ramps and all
Yeah.
that
Oh,
sort
yeah.
of stuff. Like, yeah,
Rocks. And,
yeah. Geez, that's rough. Yeah, 8 weeks.
yeah. No, just real fortunate to,
Mm.
it's kind of ironic too, Steve, as much as I've raced, my wife, was actually crying when I left. And I'm like, what's wrong? You know, it was going to be one of my last off-road races or, with the high speed, Baja stuff. I go, I've been pre-running everything. Everything's okay, And she's like, I just don't feel good about this. And she'd never been like that before, but the women's intuition or whatever, they know
Mm.
ahead of time, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think sometimes they do. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey,
Yeah.
Steve, what, Jeff Ballard?
I don't know him personally, but I certainly know a lot about him. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
him and Jenny, his wife, I don't know if they're still married or whatever, but
Yeah, they are.
they
Yeah.
came here. We hung out for quite a while when he was racing in the U.S. We used to have some real good times. I've always I should make an effort on social media to look him up or whatever, because we had good guy. We used to have some good times together.
Yeah, he's a oh yeah, he's a massive, massive Aussie legend. He is, yeah, yeah, and still rides, and still
Right.
fast. Yeah,
Yeah.
like, he was still. I think, mate. I don't know if he's done it the last couple of years, but it's only about probably about 3 years back. He did. He did the the vintage ISDE. What is
Right.
it, the 3 day or whatever it is that runs with the on his Mako 490 that he just loves
Right.
his Mako 490. He went over and did the vintage, that sort of thing. Like it, yeah. He's still always riding. He's still still in business, doing bits and pieces, and I think he's sold or something. A lot of his business to a bigger company here, or at least they've sort of they're working
Uh-huh.
together. He stepped back a little bit, but yeah, I'm not sure exactly how that works. But yeah, like once he come back to Australia, he started off a business out of his garage, and it blew up into a huge success. And yeah,
No,
so
all right.
yeah, he's
No,
and yeah,
good guy. Like I said, we had some good times together. He was fast, man. He was a good rider.
yeah. No, he's right up there on the list of Aussie legends. The fun memory I have of him is when he came back, I'm not sure. I've heard the story of how he got involved exactly, but I can't remember. But I remember XRs only. Was that Al Baker was doing
Yeah.
XRs only? Yeah. So Jeff started up the Aussie branch of XRs only.
Uh-huh.
Uh, down here, and he even developed some of his own stuff and that sort of thing. And he was specialising in XRs because XRs were like by far the biggest selling bike in Australia.
Uh-huh.
And the thing about XRs at the time was they they were you could ride. Yeah, they were road registerable, but still so you could everyone had one because you could literally race it on Sunday and ride
Right.
it to work on Monday.
Right.
Like I've done that before. Like race it on Sunday, pop the blinkers back on. Sometimes you wouldn't even worry about popping the blinkers back on, but then, and ride it to work on Monday with your race numbers, and that's still on, which was sort of pretty cool. And then also too, we could get our motorcycle license before our car license, which is which is an odd thing, but you could. So your first bit of independence, you wanted a bike that was road registered because you could you could hit the road solo boy, and so that was the thing. Everybody had an XR, and
Uh-huh.
he was selling the big bore kits and the big fin heads and the suspension and everything. And I remember I was an apprentice mechanic, and I'd packaged up my suspension off my XR and posted it up to Jeff Ballard to get, because he was the guru on
Right.
the XR suspension, and I remember getting a phone call, and I didn't expect it to be Jeff. I thought he probably had a
Right. Right.
team of people working there. But as it turns out, he was just pretty much working on his own in his garage. And he goes, "Oh, Steve, it's Jeff Ballard here." And I was just like freaking out. I was like, "Wow, like this is really Jeff Ballard that's ringing me."
Yeah.
I'm like a 16-year-old apprentice, you know.
Right.
And,
Right.
and he's asking me about, you know, what sort of riding I do and that, and because he was building my shock, you know. But yeah,
No,
definitely.
he was, like I said, even with Al Baker, that XR's only. He was, like I said earlier, we were talking about, he was Johnny O'Mara's manager, and they were moving the shop from Hesperia to a place called Palmdale, and Al was a pilot, and he had the guys in the box fans moving stuff up, and Al went down to kind of buzz them when they were buzz the box fans when he was flying his airplane, and actually hit a high tension wire, and the guys in the box fans saw him crash the plane. So that's it was just bad, because that was right about a little bit later, maybe within 6 months or whatever, that we were finishing with the DR 350, and several trips to Japan, and he was just a great guy.
Yeah, geez, I didn't. That sort of rings a bell now, but yeah, I think I've probably read about that at the time. I guess, yeah.
Oh, right.
But yeah, I didn't realize that was what happened to him. Yeah, yeah. What you're saying about the RMX, that's a amazing bike. You know, I have a great memory of the RMX, which actually it ties in exactly to what I was just talking about. We all rode XRs, and we would we would do everything on those XRs and that sort of thing. And
Right.
A local guy bought the very first model RMX, and he was also the best rider in town for a start. But yeah, he bought this RMX, and we were just like, "Wow, look at this thing! It's like an RM with lights. Like,
Right.
How cool is that?" And I remember him trying to talk me into riding it. He goes, "You got to ride this. You got to ride this." And I resisted. And then one time, and we were in an amazing area for riding too, you know. And he goes, "Righto, we're swapping bikes, and you're riding this till we get back to camp." You know, and it's like, "You've got to ride this bike." And I got on it, and it was just like life changing what a bike could do. I was just like,
Oh, right.
Oh my God. Like, I thought my XR was a pretty good bike. And how good
Right.
is this thing, you know? Yeah, and I still regret not buying one. But the main reason I didn't is because of that road registration. That was basically
Oh, is that right?
that was the reason why I stuck with the XR, was because of that road registration. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Which we were lucky to have here. But yeah, that RMX, yeah, I remember it just being an amazing bike, and I've loved those things ever since. Yeah. I'd like to restore one day. Actually,
I've got one, Steve. Actually, I was pretty bummed out one year. I had engine number one. I'm sorry, engine number two, and I had frame number one, and they were pre-production, so you couldn't do anything with them. You couldn't sell them or anything. But I'd set those off to the side, and they were called not an inventory or whatever, but they were in like in a, what do you call it, a holding pattern, if you will. They weren't registered or whatever. So anyway, I went to I had a fair amount of bikes in my inventory or whatever. So when I went to Japan one time, the shop guys just cleaned out my section, and one of them was the frame number one. I was going to just build a bike. I wanted to have that number one and that number two. I was just going to build a bike to have here. I wasn't going to ride it or anything. And I came back, and they destroyed the frame and the because a lot of times, Steve, we used to just cut the name tag out and then weld another plate over it to keep the frame. But I lost number one and number two, but I bought another one, and it's been sitting at one of our other places. And I've got to get it down here and just go over it. I've got all the plastic from Achirby's and Randy Hawkins National Enduro stamped hand guards and ISDE number plates, and Brock Lover's given me a couple of tires for it because they were an 18-inch tire in the back, and so I just got to go find the time and go grab that thing. And I've got a good portion of it all apart. I want to get the frame powder coated, and I've got a titanium bolt kit for it, and so that's another project.
Yeah, I can remember at the time, all guys really, everyone, in Australia, that all they wanted for off-road was exactly what the RMX was. Like, that's what people wanted. And there was different rules and that, and there was even like, you different rules, and there was even dudes were like getting motocross bikes and putting like there was famously a guy who won down here on it was clearly a YZ, but it had an IT compliance plate on it,
right?
And blue fenders, and it was really like a point of contention, because that's what they wanted, that's what the consumer wanted, and then some manufacturers are having a crack at this, and some of the KDX 200s were pretty good, but they weren't they still weren't just a motocross bike with an 18-inch rear wheel, a kickstand, and lights, and like that's what people wanted, So then obviously Yamaha did the WR, which was a similar sort of thing, and that sort of thing, and then pretty much that concept, KTM sort of took that concept and ran with it in later days, didn't they? And because that's what we wanted, don't need too many bells and whistles. You just want that the basics, yeah.
Well, see, we had a rider support program. Once again, we had to help promote sales of the bike. We had a contingency program for different race series across the country. District 36, if you wanted an RMX, you'd get in your 250 intermediate or whatever, it's like a $200 credit to the dealer. So it's a contingency program. So we had that. I monitored that for 6 or 7 years or whatever, and it was real successful. But when we got the first bike, Steve, there was no testing done here at all on it or whatever. To get the bike into the U.S., there's a couple of ways to get a bike through the U.S. Closed course, which is a motocross bike, and it really doesn't have to meet too many criteria, other than I don't even think it has to meet a sound criteria. They keep them down to, I think, about 92 decibels of what they have to be. Well, the RMX came through and it had this huge muffler on it. It had a throttle limiter on the throttle. You could only turn the throttle so much. And then it had a head gasket, a really thick head gasket on the thing. Well, the thing would hardly even run, but it was 89 decibels was what it had to be, or which was really quiet. But to get it through, and it's like this first RMX shows up, I'm like, what the hell is this? And we knew nothing about it. So we were able to offer a closed course competition kit, which was a head gasket, a throttle limiter, and then a muffler. And at first they were trying to sell it, and I'm like, guys, listen, the guys are buying a bike based on what we told them it was going to be. We jumped on these bikes at the dealer show. Randy Hawkins, Steve Hatch, and I, in Palm Springs, we had a national convention there. All three of us jumped the bikes up onto the stage and rode them around or whatever, and that's what we expected to be able to sell, and that's what the dealers had seen. So they ended up making a competition kit for it, but it came back to where we would give it to whoever bought one would get us an off-road competition kit then. And but I got Mitch Payton to I think we had 10 support riders throughout the United States, different areas when the shops had done real well or whatever in that area, whatever. We gave them a cylinder, a pro circuit pipe, pro circuit cylinder, pro circuit muffler, pro circuit pipe and cylinder, and it was night and day difference from production to that. Just put Mitch's stuff on, so that was a real successful thing working with Mitch and doing that.
Yeah, it's funny. We've had the similar sort of things down here where, you know, bikes would come with just like a plate, a plate over the exhaust port, you know, or I remember the XRs. We used to have to port the plastic, the inlet manifold, you know, but to the carb was about, you know, the size of a I'll say a 20-cent piece, which doesn't make any sense to the US listeners, but it was small, right? You know, so
Right.
you know, and so you used to have to take that off and grind that out. It was easy to grind out because it was plastic, but you actually had to port that out to the normal size and bolt it
Just to
back
get
on.
it to run.
They did that just for the that sort of thing, just for the noise and all that, just to get it
Right.
for the road registration things and all that sort of thing. So sort of here it's either they're right for road registration or they're not. They're sort of not. There's really only two levels, you know. So you can, in some areas, like luckily in my state, which something that was really cool that we have, you can get a thing called recreational registration, which where you can even modify a motocross bike and get a limited registration on it, which just gives you basically gives you insurance for off-road riding. So it gives you some accident insurance. So and makes you legal to ride out the bush, as we say. So you know, that's but pretty much, there's no. It's a pretty complicated there in California, isn't it? Still don't
Oh,
quite
yeah.
get the green stickers and all that sort of thing. Yeah,
Right.
I don't really understand how all that stuff works. Yeah.
No, it was, well, basically, I mean, it's basically there's two ways to bring the bikes are in closed course and then off road. And then the off road, it's basically comes into emissions now too. And even at the time when I was racing for Honda, we had the Honda XR 650s with the 4-speed transmission. They'd take one of the gears out because the bikes were so fast they were blowing up a production transmission. So they'd make them from a 5-speed to a 4-speed and put bigger gears in them. And so we were racing a 4-stroke, which was approved to be racing off-road or whatever, and we're racing them against Kawasaki on the KX 500s. Well, I'm sure you've ridden the XR 600 versus the KX 500. It's pretty much night and day difference. But Kawasaki was kind of rolling the dice because they're promoting the use of a closed course competition bike by racing it off-road. They're promoting the use of a closed course competition bike to be raced off-road, which it wasn't really intended to do. And there was, with Suzuki, that's one of the reasons we had to change some things too. The fines were all set in place. The EPA, thank God, had other things to worry about. The Environmental Protection Agency, they had things to worry, but the fines were all set. If you promoted the use of a closed course competition bike to be ridden off-road, I mean, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars because there was so much fine per bike sold. So
Really? Yeah.
Suzuki wouldn't take the opportunity. When, like I said, Kawasaki at the time, they were rolling the dice by racing that KX 500. But like I said, fortunately, EPA had other things to worry about.
Yeah, it's all very, very complicated. Yeah, emissions and stuff like that. Yeah, we never really, you know, had too much to worry about with that sort of thing. Yeah, sound was always the thing. Like some of the 2-strokes we would get with crazy exhausts and things that were super choked up, so they could, you know, and a few things like that. The RMX didn't. Our RMXs came just like ready to go. You know, there was no worries about that because they were sold as a race bike. You know,
right.
But luckily, like I said, where I live, you could get the recreational registration on them, which was a pretty cool thing. You know, like I've got motocross bikes in the shed now with those with the recreational rego on them. So it and you know, like you can, I forget the exact rules. They're pretty grey, but you can ride them down some transport sections, and you can you know, you're all right in state forests and blah blah blah. There's all these rules and that sort of thing. But the main thing is, the main thing they worry about is the insurance, because our medical system's way different to yours. You know, we have a lot of, most of our medical's like public health, so the insurance with that and all that sort of thing is really important with that. Yeah. Righto. It's time for an ad read. Greg's Ultra Trick Seats. That's what GUTS stands for. GutsRacing.com is the website. That's a very easy one to remember. GutsRacing.com. RJ Hampshire lit the flames on his Supercross title on a Guts Racing seat this year. You also got, in Europe, you got Kyder Wolf and Lucas Conan battling it out for a world championship. Both of them on Guts seats. In Australia, we have Jed Beaton right in the mix for an Australian championship on a Guts seat. So all over the world, riders are winning on Guts seats. Other riders like Ken Roxon, Malcolm Stewart, Mitchell Harrison, Scott Meshy, Dylan Ferrandis, Phil Nicoletti, the list just goes on and on. Phil's doing his farewell season, crushing it on a Guts seat. Hopefully Kenny will be back soon. Obviously, Guts Racing do seat covers. They also do complete seats, replacement foams, the ultralight seat foam. You can get custom seats with a seat bump. You can get the wide wing seat. You can get tall seats if you're a big sort of a lanky fella. The website for Guts is amazing. You can go on there. You can choose the color for the top, for the side, for the ribs. You can add ballistic material to the knee area. If you are a guy who is a big knee brace guy that's tearing up the sides of your seat, you can also get a Velcro fitment seat cover if you don't want to tackle the job with a staple gun. Huge range of colors. If you can think of it, they will have it. Speaking of the fitment of those seats, when you get your Guts seat cover, it comes with a QR code, and you scan that code. It will take you to a video where you'll see Andy Gregg himself showing you how to install that seat cover. That's pretty cool. You don't get that with too many companies, do you? As privateer hero Scott Meshy says, they are a butt gripper and they will make you a ripper. And good luck. Scott Meshy's back at the races too. I've got to catch up with him. GutsRacing.com. Once again, that is the website. That's a really easy one to remember. GutsRacing.com. Okay, let's get back and see what Charles Halcomb's got to say. Cool. Charles, how many 6-day enduros did you do?
Actually, I rode, this will sound kind of funny, I rode 6.5. I rode 5 by myself. I got 3 golds, a silver, and a bronze. And the silver was on a DR350, and Randy Hawkins and I had both ridden DR350s in that event. It was in Finland, and Randy and I were both. I mean, I was his team manager, and he was a rider or whatever, and I wasn't even supposed to be a racer, but Suzuki let me ride some of these events. And actually, Randy was sponsored by White Brothers, and so he had White Brothers build him a bike. And then Rob Muzzy, who was a noted road race, he was really well known for his engine building at the time. Well, he lived up in Hesperia, real close to Al Baker. So I got to be pretty good friends with him. And he says, "Hey, Charles, let me build you a bike." So Muzzy built my motor, and then White Brothers built Randy's motor. And I mean, they were night and day difference. I mean, mine was significantly better than Randy's. And so I let Randy ride mine before we crated him up and shipped. I go, "Hey, I can get you a cylinder, and a head, and we can." No, I want to ride. I'm like, "Okay, great." Well, after the first day, it was Finland's usually really rocky, and it's pretty gnarly to ride through. But the first day special tests there were 6 of them or whatever, and they were pretty pretty fast or whatever. I ended up fourth overall in the 350 class. Randy was like eighth or ninth. And I mean, it was just not so much riding, but I mean, there was a little bit of riding ability, but my bike was way better than his, and they were fast special tests. So anyway, second day, Randy, they stripped the head bolts out on Randy's bike or whatever, and he started losing oil. Well, he ended up DNF in that race. I think that was the only 6 days that he DNF'd. Later in the event, I broke a clutch, and I was able to fix it through. I got it to the end of the day, so I had 15 minutes there, and then another 15 minutes in the morning to get it fixed. But I got it fixed, but I still dropped 3 what they call EVs, evaluation points, and so I went from a gold to a silver. My special test times were all good, but if you drop 1 minute at the ISTE, you're not going to get a gold medal because you got to be a certain percentage of the class leader. But so I got a bronze medal for my first ISTE in Holland for basically towing in Kevin Brown, and then I got a silver for the in Finland for when I should have DNF'd really or whatever, but I was able to get the bike from the finish, and then I had 3 golds. And then I rode when Honda asked me to ride for them. They needed a chase rider for Scott Summers, and first year we went to I went back to Finland. I think that was another Finland event, and we got Scott a gold medal, and he had cartwheeled a couple of times. And Steve, I'm sure you've heard the lessons. I mean, we were slow in learning them or whatever as far as chase bikes and like all the Euros. You got 6 special tests a day, 6 days. You're going to throw it away and cartwheel and do some damage to the bike. So the chase riders were really important or whatever because they switch bikes and get whatever was fixed. Even with Scott with the XR600, he cartwheeled, bent the bars really bad, bent the subframe, and it wasn't a removable subframe. So we had points throughout the week or whatever. I would go and find different spots if we did have an issue with a bike in the special tests. I found a house or something right after the special test where we could switch bikes and not be seen, switch number plates, and then the race bikes are all coated with a paint on the engines and those wheels and what have you. So I have to get the bike, I have to get it fixed. I have to switch bikes with them, I have to get it fixed. And then I've got to get back to them before the park for May, which is impound. So we were able to do that. Scott had 2 big cartwheels and bent the subframe, got the subframe fixed. But anyway, he actually bought my son a XR100, my son Casey, when we were all done because he was he got a fair amount of money for getting a gold medal. Then that was in Italy. I'm sorry, it was in Finland. Then the next year I went to Italy with him, and I'm following a guy pre-running. Wasn't even the day of the race or whatever. A guy by the name of Tomas Gustafsson, who was one of the main engineers for Husaberg. And we were going down a hill, and it was kind of led down to a pretty steep hill that led down to a road, and it had like a V. At the last minute, we saw where we had to get way over to get to this V. Well, Tomas didn't quite make it. It was hard packed ground with grass on it. Loses the front end, falls and blocks this V. And Steve, I hit him. I hit the bike. I go over the bars and put a big cut in my eye. And I didn't even get. They had to get another chase rider. So I didn't even. I said I rode 5.5 or 6.5 events. That was the half event. But didn't quite make that one.
Yeah. Did you do the one in Australia? Was that 90?
No, we were gonna go, Steve, and then something happened. Our administration, it didn't work out or whatever. Every year, we didn't have it in the riders' contracts to ride the ISTE. It was kind of a bonus, and something happened. Mr. Shigenoya, who was our company VP, always approved it. It was like a bonus for us to be able to go. And he was in Japan, and when we needed to get an answer, it just didn't happen. So yeah, we didn't. I never got to go down there, but I was always looking forward to going down there. It always looked like a great event.
Yeah, so that would have been in your Honda days,
right?
Yeah, because I know the Team Suzuki guys came. Yeah, I know that. Rodney Smith and Steve Hatch and that they were here on
Right.
RMXs. Yeah. But then,
Like I say,
and
it's
on it
just
too.
good friends though, Steve. I still talk to Steve. He's in New York. He's 3,000 miles away, but he has a real successful rider training program. And then Rodney Smith, he lives in Idaho, and he's one of the beta team, not a team manager, but I think he's a he was a team manager, off-road team manager for beta, but now he's more of a figurehead. But both those guys, just good guys, and I know I won't get in too much trouble here because Rodney's not married anymore, but we were going to a race called Wilseyville, Steve, and it's a Northern California race. Great race. They've been having it for 30, 40 years. And we're following Rodney, and all of a sudden there's no Rodney. Like, where the hell Rodney go? So we back up, looking around for him or whatever, and like, there he is there. And we could see his van parked off the side or whatever. So, and he was with a gal then or whatever. So we just let him be, and then found our way to the race. And then the next week, I had roadside put on the back of his pants, and a lot of guys that know him still call him either Julio or roadside.
I've heard the Julio. I've heard that. I've heard and seen that. Yeah.
No, he's a good guy. Him and his dad, they were a big part of District 36 too.
Yeah. And yeah, Steve, I had Steve on the show quite a while back there, and that was really, really good fun to talk to him.
Oh, he's a great guy.
We're going to do another show at some stage with him and Denise, and talk about what she does as well. So, with the power of the mind stuff and that she does sounds really interesting too. Yeah, but he's a character, isn't he? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We had some good times for sure.
Yeah, and
pretty interesting, Steve. Pretty interesting, Steve. Too. I ran that several years after I got out of the industry or whatever. I got approached by a guy by the name of Chad Lanza, who had a team with the Works Racers. We had Bobby Bonds, Bobby Garrison, and Kyle Summers. And I mean, the guy did it right. He had a beautiful work shop. We bought a 40-foot semi and box fans for the riders to go practice on, and he had a place for them to stay. And anyway, it was just a good time. But when I managed Suzuki, I didn't have anybody over me telling me how to do it. It was just, hey, we wanted to have a good time. You keep the riders loose and having a good time, the results are going to follow. And when I was with him, he's like trying to tell me, I go, hey, why did you hire me? You let me work with these guys or whatever. We need the results, Chuck. We need the results. These guys, I mean, he was firing guys at night, Kyle Summers, and then having them rehired at Saturday morning. And meanwhile, the guys aren't sleeping. And obviously the results weren't there, but we had, he was actually kind of the precursor or whatever he got to be good friends with the guy that owned Star Racing. And to where, I mean, so Chad was actually instrumental in actually helping to start Star Racing to what it is now. But I worked for him for about a year and realized that that wasn't, he was paying me decent money, but it wasn't the thing for the type of involvement that I wanted to be around.
Not the right sort of culture for you.
Yeah. Little different.
Yeah. You how much involvement did you have with Malcolm Smith in your Husqvarna days?
Steve, it's Malcolm Smith. It was kind of interesting when we came out with the RMX. Real good friend of mine, Scott Link, was involved with distributing and selling Yoko gear in the U.S. And so with the RMX, it was new. The Yoko gear was really pretty flashy, and it was new. So it really, really worked out well for both of us. So whatever, we helped promote each other's product. And we used the Yoko gear for quite a few years. And then Answer and Malcolm joined forces, And so they made us an offer for a really good offer or whatever to ride, to use their clothing. And so we actually used their clothing for quite some time. But Malcolm, Jeff Fox, as I mentioned before, he's with Fox Racing, good friend of mine. And I was in his office one time, and he's got a 1971 400 CR gas tank signed by Malcolm on his desk. I go, God, that's a great idea. And so, Steve, we used to, there was a company here in Santa Cruz called Cyclecraft. They used to make these fiberglass gas tanks. So you could take the original gas tank off the Husky, put on a Cyclecraft one or whatever, and then save the, I got time to sell the thing. So, Steve, I was sponsored by Husky. We used to do what they call a delayed billing. They'd give us a bike for 4 months. And then in 4 months, they'd give us a really reduced price on it. We'd sell the bike and get another one. So we used to take my gas tank off, and I saw this gas tank in Jeff Fox's office, and I got to be a great idea. So I went to John Moore, who was our motorcycle dealer here in town that I used to work for. I go, John, man, I'd really like to find a gas tank. He said, yeah, I've had some, but I couldn't, he had some containers, Steve, that were just buried or whatever. When he sold the shop, he was going through them and he found one. He goes, the last Husky that I had, we actually sold it with the fiberglass gas tank on it. He goes, Charles, I found your original 250 tank from 1974. And the bottom of it, Steve, didn't have a cap on it, was rusted out. So I just bonded that and got it fixed and then sent it to one of our helmet guys and got it painted and sent it down to Malcolm and had Malcolm sign it. So I've got that sitting on my desk now. But no, he was great. He used to do these trail rides, Steve, to promote his new year clothing. And one year we went up to a place in Auburn, and it was a trail ride from there up to Sierra Ski Ranch, and all off road, pretty gnarly or whatever. But Malcolm was on that. I was there with Randy and Steve Hatch. And we came to this one section. The guys that were leading the course, leading us away, they had some storms and knocked down these trees. So we had barely enough gas to go all the way back. And so I'm like, hey, listen, we got to build this ramp or whatever. We can build this ramp to get up over these trees. Some of the guys couldn't do it or whatever. We'll ride your bikes over there. I'm pretty confident I can get the bikes over this thing. So we built this thing up. Steve, was about an 8-10 foot jump up get to the top of this hill, and we got up it. So then Malcolm's like, all right, come. I go, no, Malcolm, you could do this. No, Charles, you ride my bike up. So I had to ride Malcolm's bike up. But yeah, he's not, I don't think he's doing real well right now. His son Joel Woods, I'm not Joel, but his son Joel Smith, I follow, and Malcolm's still around, but he's obviously getting a little slower. But no, just a great guy.
When I was in California, I like my first stop was Malcolm Smith Motorsports. And I spent a lot of time upstairs in his museum and all that, and
right,
it was just amazing. And I did ask him there how often Malcolm comes in, and they said, only like a couple of times a year now. He's not there too often because he's certainly a hero of mine. So that's for sure.
Steve, I think he's living in Colorado now.
Yeah.
I don't even think he's in California.
Yeah. No, he's a. I say I'm like I'm a product of On Any Sunday. So my family wasn't into motorcycles, and watching that movie was a big part of
for sure.
how my life turned out.
Yeah, it's just fun to even watch it. Steve, every couple of years just to watch it. I watched it a while ago or whatever, and Malcolm with those desert races and stuff, the Elsinore Grand Prix, guys are stuck in the mud. He's going out in the the fields around him, and pretty classic.
But when I was in California, I had to go to Elsinore, the town of Elsinore. When I got to the edge of the town and I saw the sign Elsinore, that was just so cool for me. That was just this is amazing,
for sure.
and 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 even Murrieta, because Murrieta's mentioned in On Any Sunday and all that sort of thing. It was all that was something that was really really cool for me. Yeah, really cool. Yeah, cool. I saw you did a post. You reminded me when you held up the buckwheat pants there. Yeah, you did a post where there was some what did I wrote it down, in search of, on the back of your on the back of some pants from the 6 days. Tell us the story about that. That sounds pretty funny. Yeah.
No, Steve, was pretty funny. Like I said, we almost every Thursday when I was at Suzuki, I was my title was off-road racing manager, but I also worked in press relations. I did when we'd have the new models or whatever. I'd because I knew all the magazine guys from my previous job at press relations manager at Husqvarna. I used to do a lot of the new model introductions, and so I knew all the magazine guys or whatever. So usually, not every Thursday, but Tom Webb from Dirt Rider Magazine, Dirt Bike Magazine, worked at both publications. He used to live in a place called Palmdale. Well, Palmdale is really where Hannah grew up, and they've got a place called Bean Canyon, and it's just a great. After it rains, see such just big elevations, hills and stuff or whatever, and we used to go riding there, and there was a guy too. This is a funny story. Second or third year we were selling the RMXs. We were doing so well with them. They gave me more budget to hire another rider. So I hired a guy, Kevin Hines, who was from the East Coast. And so I had Kevin come out and ride the bike. We took him to Bean Canyon. And Kevin's a great rider or whatever, but it's just different terrain than what New England doesn't have, all these hills and stuff like we have out here. And so I'd hired a guy by the name of Mark Mangold, who Tom Webb used to call him Mental, that he got this nickname from, rather than Mark Mangold. We called him Mental. Pretty big boy, 6'2", 6'3", probably 250 pounds. But he was Hannah's practice bike mechanic. So he'd go out with Hannah, and Hannah he grew up riding at this Bean Canyon. So Mark knew the area real well. So I didn't know the area that well. So anytime we'd go riding, just let Mark lead. And so I had Mark with us when we brought Kevin Hines out. And Kevin's, Charles, who's a friggin' fat guy? And I go, hey, just don't worry. He goes, hey, I want to ride today. Don't worry. We're not going to have to wait for Mark. He'll send us on our way. And then he knows shortcuts. He'll meet back up with us. So don't even worry about having to wait for him. You're going to get a good workout in today. So Steve, one of the first hills we're going down to, I mean, it's almost straight down, and wherever there's a little clump of bushes, there's sand around it. And I mean, you kind of stay away from them because they actually act as a jump. Well, there was two trails that kind of came together. I was on one side with Kevin, and they like I say, they merged together about halfway down this hill. And I mean, it's straight down. And we'd set this all up ahead of time or whatever. Mark waited for Kevin to come to where these trails merge, hit this little bush or whatever that had like a bunch of sand around it, jumps over Kevin. And Steve, it's almost straight down. I mean, it's
yeah.
pretty, and Mark, a couple turns later, he's gone. So we catch up to him, and Kevin's like, Charles, who the hell is this guy? It says Mark's Mangold. This guy's mental. Who would ever jump over somebody like that? And I go, well, hey, he grew up riding with Hannah. He's a pretty good rider, as you could see, or whatever. You can't judge a book by its cover. But anyway, that's how Mark got his nickname here, Mental. But he went on to become Steve. I started the amateur support program for Suzuki, and we had an East Coast truck and a West Coast truck, and Mark was in charge of the West Coast events, and just good guy. I still talk to him fairly often. He's good friends with Tom Webb's.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Tom Webb, and I've said before on the show. So I'm a writer. I do some writing. I've done writing for a couple of different websites and that sort of thing, and I love writing about moto. and pretty much the inspiration for that comes from Rick Simon and Tom Webb. So
Right.
I think my writing style definitely comes from those guys. From that was when I was a kid and I was supposed to be reading some book for homework. I was reading those two guys. So
Oh, cool.
that yeah, that was that. Yeah, big
I had a
fan of that. I
long
remember,
time
I
friend.
remember, I remember reading about Mental. I absolutely can
Oh
remember
yeah,
reading
no, about him.
So
He's a class of his own. But I kind of was leading up to Steve. You asked me about that In Search Of pant, and
yeah,
Tom actually knew Jim Hale at Answer Products, and they sent me pants and gear and everything for the 6 days that year. And I never even opened up the pants. I went to look at them or whatever. And day 6, I opened up the pants, and there's this. It was NSERCHOF, In Search Of. Well, we used to always look for jumps. Probably me more than anybody when we were out riding at Bean Canyon. And so Tom had those pants In Search Of labeled on. I was just going through some stuff the other day. I was looking through some gear for the Fox event. It was 70s and 80s era. And so I found those pants or whatever. So I said something to Tom about them or whatever. He goes, "Oh, yeah, yeah." He goes, "I pulled one over for you." But Tom and I, Tom's an avid golfer, as it seems a lot of motocross guys, Steve, as in racing or whatever, it's not a team. You're by yourself. You don't get the results. You can't blame it on somebody else. And golf is the same way. It's all you. And your Lawrence boys or whatever, usually every Sunday, that's their day off. They're out golfing. And I was just so bummed to have Jet get hurt this year or whatever, and but it'll interesting when he comes back.
Yeah. So you still play a bit of golf with Wolfman?
Yeah, no, Tom. He just had his shoulder redone, and so he hasn't been able to golf at all. But same thing on Thursdays when we used to get together with Larry Rosser and go riding at Bean Canyon, or Glen Helen. Glen Helen had a couple golf courses that were real close, and Larry Rosser and Tom and I would go out, and it's just classic too. I've got to be real good friends with David Bailey from. He's he's paralyzed and he can only swing really, Steve, with one hand, but he's got the golf bug so friggin' bad. When we were up here for the Road to Recovery fundraiser that we did for the Northern California Motocross Reunion, David came up and golfed with us and just had a great time. And so he's coming back up for the next one, but he's just having lessons done now. And he just, see if you can imagine too, being paralyzed, you transfer in and out of the cart the whole time, or the wheelchair, with your shoulders. And he just had shoulder surgery. So it's been 7 or 8 months. He's just now getting back to where he can golf and stuff. So been taking lessons and stuff, but it's funny. He's got the bug so friggin' bad. It's not even funny.
Yeah. I listened to David was on something I listened to recently, another podcast. I can't recall which one, and he was talking about the golf,
Right.
how he loves it.
And we have he's got it. And like I say,
yeah,
Brock Glover or whatever. It's you can see Steve. Brock's so hard on himself. He works a lot. As you know, he's gone every weekend, and even at home when he's not involved with the motocross stuff, he's usually involved with the road racing stuff. They keep him running, and but he's an avid golfer, and he's so friggin' hard on himself. But you can just see it though, Steve. When they're out playing or whatever, this is classic. We're playing in a fundraiser a couple of years ago, and he just hits the ball and hit a 300-yard drive. That's like PGA Pro distance, and he hits ones out there. It's like 280 yards, And I go, "God, Brock, great drive." And he goes, "Shut up, Charles." And this is a joke with us all now. And I go, "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" I go, "Great drive." He goes, "I hit it on the toe of the club, which is not in the center of the club." You can feel it in your hand, Steve, when you do that. So it's just classic now. "Shut up, Charles," every time he hits one or whatever. But he's so hard on himself. You can see, Steve, why he was successful at doing what he did for racing. You almost most of these guys are pretty, and it sounds bad, self-centered, but it's what do I need to do to make myself better today? And
Yeah.
the successful guys are like that, and Brock, you can just see it. He's just so hard, not he's so much self-centered anymore or whatever, but he's just so hard on himself. But you can just see it. A lot of guys have a hard time playing with Brock because he gets so pissed. He's so competitive, not necessarily with the other guys he's playing with, but because he's so hard on himself. But it's I like playing with him. We have a good time. But it's real quick story on that too, Steve. We when we did the Northern California Motocross reunion, we had a guy by the name of Joe Abadi be our announcer. And Joe was like, "God, Charles, yeah, I wanted to ask Brock about the let Brock by incident, years ago with him and Hannah." I go, "Hey, do you know Brock?" I go, "No." And I go, "Well, if you don't want to be his friend, ask him about it because it's still not something that he likes to talk about." So I go, "If you want to talk to him about it, get him off the side or whatever, but don't ask him in front of anybody or whatever. It's not something he's real happy about." I mean, Brock's had a unbelievable career, but yet one of the first things you mentioned to people about Brock Lauber, yeah, let Brock by. Well, I'd be pissed too if I was him, especially with the career that he's had or whatever, And so, but anyway, we're golfing after Hangtown one time up in Truckee. We have a friend of ours has a place up there, up in Lake Tahoe. And I think we stayed at Rob's house. This guy, buddy of mine, Rob Stewart's got a place up there. Stayed at Rob's house. I think I bought breakfast the next morning. Rob paid for Brock's green fees, and somebody else paid for lunch. They came for dinner or whatever. And the gal brings a bill there or whatever. And Brock's got awful short arms. I'm just saying he's a little frugal, but he's a little frugal. I said probably the most appropriate diplomatic way to say it.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, one of our guys says, "Brock, I paid for your green fees and this and that." He goes, "They should probably change that slogan on the pit board that they gave you at San Antonio years ago. Let Brock by. Instead of BY, it should be BUY." And he goes, "Shut up, you guys. I'm going to buy dinner or whatever." But anyway, it was a pretty classic. It could have gone either way, would have. But fortunately, Brock's had a pretty good sense of humor.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, it's funny that you hear stories. There's a lot of moto guys that do have pretty short arms and long pockets, isn't there? It's a bit of a theme that gets around. There's
right.
a few. Yeah, there's a few. Yeah.
I'll just say frugal is probably the best description, Steve.
Yeah. It's funny. Like I'm like that in a lot of ways, but never in a social sense. Like, not with other people. Like,
Right.
I'll scrap and save money just for myself. But yeah, in a social setting, or when it comes to paying my share or anything with other people, like I'm like definitely not like that. I feel bad if I, like, yeah, that sort of thing. But it's funny that some people are just like that. Yeah, it's a funny thing. Yeah. What was your favorite ever race bike?
I mean, as much as I was such a big part of enjoying the RMX or whatever. I mean, I had some great rides with the RMX, but favorite bike I had, Eric Crippo, who just passed away, was like I said, Howard's mechanic, and then he went to work for Honda for many years. But he was my a Chirby's put on a rally through the state of Nevada a couple of times, and I rode it on a. Tom Webb gave me a 620 LC4 KTM to ride the first one. He goes, "Charles, dirt bike will take care of all the expenses. KTM's posted a contingency money out there, which you'll be available to. We want you to write a story on this or whatever. So here's the bike." And but anyway, I got second that year and on the KTM. And then the next year I went to ride for Honda. And my favorite bike, that 628 was actually a 650 or whatever with the 4-speed. That bike was so fun to ride. It had the Works shows on it, the Works suspension on the front, shock. And on day 3 or 4, it's a 7-day race, Steve, and they changed the motors. And one of the first things we used to do when we come in, it had these ICO odometers because nothing could be marked. There was no danger markings. Everything was on a road book. And so we had these big road books or whatever. Even the year before, I had it was a hand crank road book, and then the next year with Honda, they were just a button controlled electric, like night and day. But that bike was probably my just was so fast, so very linear, very linear power band, and just phenomenal. But what we used to do is every day it was Chuck Miller, myself, Johnny Campbell. We had 3 magazine guys that were riding the bikes too: Tom Webb, Chris Johnham, and there was one other guy. But anyway, we had 3 guys, and every day when we'd come in, Steve, we'd hit this ICO odometer, which had a top speed mode. And my bike, it wasn't me. I guarantee it wasn't me. It was Crippa. My bike was like 2 or 3 miles an hour faster. I mean, Steve, you're doing 118, 120 miles an hour. I mean, it's all through the Nevada. You had to look, me being a motocrosser, you want to look right at where you are for off-road and off-road. I had to really look out ahead a long way, especially 100 miles an hour. But my bike with Crippa, whatever, would be just every day would be 2 or 3 miles an hour quicker or whatever. And like I said, not me. We're laying down on the bikes, sometimes for 20, 30 minutes at a time, but anyway, that bike was probably one of my funnest bikes, and then to ride that and the RMX, and like in the ISCE, the special test or whatever, we actually at the time were one up on everybody. The bikes with those pro circuit cylinders and stuff were, it's got to be usable power too. You can have the bike, hit real hard or whatever, but Mitch had made those bikes. We had great low end, and they revved. And you need the low end really to get off the corner, so you're not spinning the wheels or whatever, And I'll compare it to Stefan Peterhansel. He's won the Paris to Dakar several times, and ISTE is won overall. But you watch the guy ride, and he doesn't even look like he's revving the bike. And you have to use those ecology tires. So Steve Hatch and I, we would come in or whatever. We used to have a little more of a motocross-oriented style, and we're clutching the bikes, and it sounds good, like you're coming out of the corner quick or whatever, but you're not hooking up. And like we look at the end of the day, we would video Peter Hansel. I was like, oh God, we hadn't seen the times yet. We looked like we kicked Peter Hansel's butt. And you go in, Peter Hansel's beating you by 10 seconds, but he's not spinning the wheel. He's keeping the bike straight up and down. So he's got a good contact patch with the tire. And anyway, that was a good comparison for us.
Yeah, it's amazing that I've told the story before on the show. That the first time I saw Toby Price, I was a sweep rider for a round of the Aussie Off-Roads, which is sort of our premier off-road racing series. And this is before he went to Dakar and all that sort of thing. And right. he was dominating the Aussie Off-Roads, and remember seeing him and how smooth and look. He didn't look as fast as the guys that were coming, 4th and 5th.
Right.
He was just so unbelievably smooth and just winning so easily with this smooth style. Like I had to go and sit out at this. There was this spot where you sort of come out of a dry creek, so it was basically like a jump, and then you basically landed and then went sort of hard left. And they knew that all the track markers, all the bunting and all that was going to get taken out, and they putting back up, especially on the first lap. And so I was out there, and of course Toby comes around, he's in front, and he got maybe 18 inches of air out of this creek, straight back to the ground.
Right.
Traction, super smooth around the corner, just bang, disappeared, gone. And I'm like, oh, I won't need to fix the bunting. It's fine, And then by the time the guys in like 7th and 8th are coming out, they're just launching out of the creek. Yes, rev limiter in the air, locking up the brakes, through their wooden stakes and bunting flying everywhere. they're missing a corner and they're taking off, and it looks super impressive. Like if
Right.
you'd think, geez, that guy's fast. But yeah, they weren't fast. They were way behind the guy that was smooth. So yeah,
Right. Yeah.
it's a the real pinnacle there. Yeah, they are super smooth. Daniel Sanders, same thing. Like he's
Right. Yeah.
so smooth. Like I've been lucky enough to watch him ride a lot, and I've even raced him. I had him on the show a while back then. We were joking about at one stage. We were in the same the same off-road club, and he was the fastest guy in the club, and I reckon I was the slowest. So like if I was in there, I wasn't really. I was probably but I was up the back of the old boys class, and he was winning and that sort of thing. And so just super smooth, just incredible to watch. And then, but
It's
yeah,
fun
like
watching those guys.
yeah. Then you see like the guy that's sort of the guy that's like winning the B grade class. He looks the fastest to the untrained eye because he's just all over the place. But that's why he's a B grader and not a pro. So yeah, that's it. Yeah,
Well, that same analogy though, Steve, Randy Hawkins and Steve Hatch. We had those at the time. Probably even with 3.2 gallon gas tanks. Steve, I mean, he looked fast, hitting the clutch and all over the place. And Randy, we wouldn't have to replace his clutch in 3 or 4 races. Steve, sometimes we had to do in between gas checks, and Randy would not even be close to running out of gas. Steve had to carry gas, and it's the same bike, but just different riding styles.
Yeah. I remember Steve telling me that his style was like wide open, like that was.
There's one position on that right hand grip.
Yeah, that's
with Steve.
Right. Yeah.
He was fast,
but it worked for him. Yeah, it definitely worked for him. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Charles, I like to just a few sort of random different questions, mate. We could talk about your moto life for many hours, but I don't want to keep you too long. I have to definitely get you back on again to talk some more about that. But just some other sort of fun questions I like to do towards the end of the show. What makes you, so when you're watching the current riders or even junior riders, what makes you a fan? What are you seeing a guy and I'm a fan of that guy. I like this guy.
I and Steve, maybe it has a little bit to do with my type of riding style or whatever. I wasn't a Steve Hatch or whatever, hanging it out or whatever. I was always pretty much in control or whatever. And even there's several of us every year that are in a Rocky Mountain Fantasy Supercross and Motocross pool. Everybody puts in like $10 a week. If there's 17 races, well, everybody puts in $170. But watching the Lawrences, whatever, I mean, they've just been so great for the sport. You look at Jet versus Hunter; they're really controlled riding styles. Jet a little bit more so than Hunter, but that's what really attracts. I mean, anybody. I'll use a good analogy here. Barsha, Justin Barsha Bam Bam. I mean, you look at his riding style, and I don't know how he stays on the bike or whatever. How the bike even stays underneath him. And then you look at somebody like Jet, and it's the same thing with probably Steve Hatch on the off road versus Peter Hansel. Just that's what. I just like really to see a rider that's in control, and those guys are so good about keeping the bike straight up and down. Some of the other riders, Sexton's finally starting to learn a little bit about it, but the guys come out of the corner and they get the bike straight up and down and get the full pattern of the tire touching the ground really quick. And Jet's just so good about that. I don't know whether he's consciously think about it or it's probably just primarily a riding style of his, but it's just fun to watch.
It's amazing, and he's an alien. That's what, he's a cyborg or an alien or something. It's just
right.
It's ridiculous, like so it's a tough thing though, because he's he's so impressive, but then sometimes when he's just winning so easily, it's like a little bit like, oh, like someone going to challenge this guy. So there's there's a bit of both there, but some of the things you see him do that it's just you just can't believe it. I can't remember which was one of the last rounds where he was jumping from one side. He was jumping basically from one side and sort of leaning the bike out to the right and landing in this rut that no one else was landing in. Do you remember that?
Right.
Yeah. It's hard to explain exactly what he was doing. It was just like, that is incredible. How can you do that? As he was literally turning the bike in the air to land in a different rut and just things like that. That's just,
he does things that nobody else does. And I don't think he's trying to do them. It's just his riding style or whatever, and even at Hangtown when he crashed, they did a warm-up lap, but still you can't really tell with a warm-up lap because you're not going at the race speed. But where he crashed, he was hitting this one jump and clearing another one going into a corner, and they knocked that jump down because the rut's so bad after practice. He was doing it in practice. He was one of the only few. I was there at the event. And he was one of the only ones doing it in practice, and then they knocked it down, and he tried it in the race, and didn't quite make it. It took a big crash there, but
he must have not noticed it on the sight lap, I guess, because they said they had knocked it down, and the way it was knocked down, like it was pretty much impossible to make it anymore. You know?
Yeah.
But obviously he missed it on the sight lap or whatever, and certainly a costly mistake.
Yeah,
costly mistake for him, but but he's got plenty of winning in his future. Oh. He's not going to be shy for trophies and money, so he'll be okay.
No,
he'll be okay. Charles, a fun question I haven't asked anyone for a while. So a road trip. So who are you taking on a road trip? Like the most fun road trip you can imagine. Who are you taking and where are you going? So
we've had these. I've gotten into golf actually quite a bit or whatever, and we do this trip. We've been doing it for 17 years. We go up to Lake Tahoe or whatever, and it's just some of the guys I've known since third grade, but. A good trip for me on something like that, it would be a golf trip or whatever with my son, who's my son was down at UCSB at Santa Barbara for quite a while, and he was playing 54 holes a day with. He got to be friends with a LPGA gal by the name of Beth Allen down there, but it'd be fun. It'd be a good trip for me. Ideal trip for me would be to any good golf destination. We've been talking about going to Missouri. There's Tiger Woods just developed this one section there or whatever, and we're talking about going there with a couple of my longtime buddies, and my son would be a highlight trip for me.
Nice. What about what's your sense of humor like, man? Do you have like a favorite comedian or that sort of thing? What really gets you laughing?
God, I'm trying to think of the guy's name. He introduces a lot of the celebrity shows or whatever. At the year end, they'll have
Ricky Gervais. Is that
Ricky Gervais? He's probably one of my favorites or whatever. I mean, he's just so subtle or whatever, and he doesn't hold back or whatever.
He's not scared, is he? Yeah.
No, but I mean that's probably one of my funnier guys to watch or whatever. I've got a pretty good sense of humor, and he usually hits the right button for me on that.
Yeah, he does it for me too, because he's just like he's just not scared like the things he says.
Those roasts that he does too, Steve. I mean, like I say, doesn't hold anything back.
Not holding back at all, which is funny. Like I reckon he's probably he probably gets a lot of people offside, I'd say.
Oh yeah. They don't know it's coming.
But he doesn't care, so it's okay.
No.
He's definitely very Very funny guy. Yeah. I haven't, most of what I've seen of him is just sort of short clips and that sort of thing. I've never
Right.
sort of seen a long show of his or anything or watched anything like that. But yeah, no, he is a good one. What about music, Charles? What sort of music are you into?
I'm sorry, Steve. What?
What sort of music are you into?
Pretty much. I like the 70s and 80s. Probably the 60s are a little bit too hardcore for me or whatever, with some of the hardcore rock and roll, but 70s and 80s or whatever, even some of the current music, I'm not really into the rap stuff too much, but more, I'll call it traditional 70s and 80s style music. And my wife jazzercises 5 or 6 times a day. I usually I'll get kicked out of the room. She used to go and jazzercise at a roller rink, but with COVID, that knocked all that down. So she just does it online now. But even so, a lot of the current music, probably more pop oriented, I should probably say, or whatever. But I still, Van Morrison was one of the older ones, and I'm still pretty traditional in a lot of in as far as the music likes go.
Yeah. Do you listen to music a lot, or?
Yeah, I pretty every time I get in my car or whatever, I've got I had Sirius in my car for like a couple, 2-3 years before I bought it. Once I bought it or whatever, but my son signed us all up for Spotify, so I just get it on the phone, and it transfers right to the car then or whatever. So and same thing, I'll listen to Channel 25, which is 70s and 80s, and but yeah, I really like music a lot.
Yeah. Cool. All right, I reckon that's just about all the questions. We're getting up, getting close towards 2 hours there. So, Charles, there's a couple of things I do to close out the show. First one is give me your best Aussie accent.
Good day, mate.
You sound a bit British.
Throw a couple of shrimp on the barbie for me.
Yeah.
That's as close as it's gonna get, Steve.
That's okay. Yeah, you sound a little bit of British twang there, which is really common when Americans try to do Aussie.
No, for sure.
There's often a little bit of they go a little bit British, but yeah, no, that's all right. There's a good.
Now, Steve, I've actually today I've got a the golf club that I belong to, Seascape. We play other local golf courses. So today at 12 o'clock, about an hour from now, we play. We've got a match with a course called Spring Hill. So they kicked our butts here when we played their course. So they're coming to us today. So we hope to be to turn the tide around a little bit today.
Oh, good luck. Good luck with that.
Oh, no, thanks.
Well, and the very last thing I do, I don't know if you've been watching any of my shows, but I sing a little bit of Kenny Rogers for the outtake, for the outro music. And all I say to people is if you know the words to Kenny Rogers the Gambler, and you're more than welcome to join in, but there's never any pressure to do so. So there's a funny backstory as to why I do this. I'm not a professional singer, and it's nothing serious. It's just a bit of fun. So I'll do that to finish the show. So I handed him my bottle, and he drank down my last swallow. Then he bummed a cigarette and asked me for a light, and the night got deathly quiet, and his face lost all expression. Said, if you're gonna play the game, boy, you gotta learn to play it right. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. You never count your money. When you're sitting at the table, there'll be time enough for counting. When the dealing's done.
Charles, not too many, Steve. A little bit there, just a little bit there. Sorry about that, but that wasn't too bad.
That's all right, man. Hey, I love it when people join in. So yeah, it's a bit of fun. Charles, thank you very much for your time today. It's been great. You've got so many stories. I definitely got to have you back on sometime. Love to meet you next time I get over to California too. So that would be.
Look forward to you ever get here, bud. Look me up. We built what they call an ADU, Steve, behind our house. accessory dwelling unit, and that's where Pat Richter he lives up in Alaska, so he's been down here a couple of times the last couple of months, and you got a place to stay, bud, anytime.
Thank you very much. I very much appreciate that, man. And yeah, good luck with golf today. Go out there and win. Yeah, man.
I'll do my best. You can bet on that.
All right. Thank you, mate. Cheers.
Appreciate it, Steve. Take care, bud.
Cheers. All right. Bye.